William Marshal's story began in a tumultuous era of medieval England. He was born around 1146 as the fourth son of a minor noble family. His father, John Marshal, was a shrewd and battle-hardened knight who served in the bitter civil war known as the Anarchy. Because William was a younger son, he was not destined to inherit land or titles. In the hierarchy of the 12th century, he would have to earn his own fame and fortune. But even as a child, fate tested William in fire. In 1152, at just 5 or 6 years old, William was caught up in the conflict between King Stephen of England and the Empress Matilda. His father John was holding Newbury Castle against the king. To secure a temporary truce, John Marshal agreed to surrender the castle and gave little William as a hostage to King Stephen, a common practice to ensure terms were met. However, John Marshal was as stubborn as he was cunning. He broke the truce, continuing to fortify the castle instead of yielding it. This betrayal put young William in deadly peril. An enraged King Stephen threatened to hang the boy or even fling him by catapult into the castle walls if John did not relent. Famously, John Marshal responded with chilling resolve, "I still have the hammer and the anvil to forge more and better sons." It was a heartless retort, essentially daring the king to do his worst. Stephen prepared to carry out the threat, ordering the child to be placed in a trebuchet. But in a dramatic turn, King Stephen could not bring himself to kill the innocent boy. Whether out of mercy or pragmatism, Stephen spared William's life. The siege ended soon after, and William was released, unharmed. The experience became legend, the little boy who survived a king's wrath. It was a harrowing introduction to the dangers of high politics and war, and it would not be the last time William Marshal escaped certain death. As he grew, William's prospects were slim. With no lands to inherit, his best hope was a life of knighthood earned through service. Around age 12, William was sent across the English Channel to northern France. There, he entered the household of his mother's cousin, William de Tancarville, the Earl of Tancarville, who was a powerful Norman lord. In Tancarville's castle in Normandy, young William trained to become a knight. Medieval knighthood training was rigorous. William learned to ride and care for war horses, to handle weapons like the sword and lance, and to observe the code of chivalry. He also learned courtly manners, serving at table and navigating the intrigues of noble life. Training was often dangerous. It was not unheard of for squires to be badly injured or even killed during rough mock combat. William, however, thrived in this environment. He was sturdy, determined, and eager to prove himself. By his late teens, William Marshal was ready for real warfare. In 1166, he got his chance. That year, he joined his first military campaign, a minor war in Normandy. During a skirmish at Neufchâtel-en-Bray, William fought with such courage that he was knighted on the battlefield, likely by his commander. It was a proud moment for the young warrior, a formal dubbing with the flat of a sword blade, rising as Sir William Marshal. Yet, unlike the romantic images of knighthood, there was no immediate glory or wealth that came with it. William owned only his weapons and armor. As a newly made knight with no land or income, he would have to live by his sword. Fortunately, he had already earned a reputation for bravery and toughness. What he lacked in wealth, he made up for in grit and talent. These qualities would soon carry him into the highest circles of the realm and into the most perilous of situations. The ambush William's entry into true fame came not long after his knighting. By 1167 or 1168, he entered the service of his maternal uncle, Sir Patrick, Earl of Salisbury. Patrick was a seasoned nobleman and a trusted military leader for King Henry II. In the spring of 1168, Earl Patrick was assigned an important task, escorting Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine through Poitou, a restive region in western France. Queen Eleanor was Henry II's wife and one of the most powerful women in Europe. The Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, she often travelled between the territories she governed. This journey, however, would be anything but routine. William Marshal rode as part of Queen Eleanor's small escort guard. As the party moved through the lush but treacherous countryside near the castle of Lusignan, danger closed in. Rebel forces loyal to the Lusignan family lay in ambush. The Lusignans were prominent lords in the region who had rebelled against King Henry's authority. In fact, Young Guy de Lusignan, a hot-headed knight from that family, sought to capture Eleanor for leverage or ransom. He and his men waited for the opportune moment to strike. That moment came when Eleanor's party was passing through a wooded area or narrow road in Aquitaine. Suddenly, a band of armed rebels swarmed around the royal escort. The ambush was swift and violent. Caught by surprise, the Queen's guards scrambled to defend their sovereign. Many of them had been riding without heavy armor in the warm daylight, which put them at a severe disadvantage. Swords clashed, and arrows flew as the rebels attacked. William's uncle, Earl Patrick, was struck down almost immediately, mortally wounded before he could even don his chainmail. The situation turned desperate. Their leader fallen, outnumbered by assailants, and the Queen in peril of capture. In the chaos, William Marshal sprang into action. He was a young knight, barely 20 years old, but battle-tested and utterly fearless. Seeing Eleanor's entourage in disarray, William fought to cover the Queen's escape. He and a handful of knights threw themselves at the attackers, buying precious moments for Eleanor. The Queen's attendants whisked her away from the fray, and she managed to flee to safety as the skirmish raged behind her. William's stand was ferocious. He unhorsed enemy riders and engaged any rebel who came near. At one point, William was struck by a lance or sword that pierced his thigh. Gravely wounded and bleeding, he still refused to yield. Surrounded by foes, he kept swinging his sword, determined to protect the Queen's retreat and avenge his fallen uncle. Ultimately, sheer numbers overwhelmed the torn band of royal knights. William, weakened from his wound, was captured by the Lusignan rebels. The ambush had been only partially successful for the attackers. The prize, Queen Eleanor, had slipped from their grasp, thanks in large part to William Marshal's resistance. But William himself now lay in enemy hands, injured and a prisoner of war. The Lusignans hauled the young knight to one of their castles. In an age when captured knights could expect either ransom or a brutal fate, William's future was uncertain. His thigh wound was serious. Infection was a real danger that could kill even the strongest man. But fate intervened once more in William's life. While he languished in captivity, someone showed him a secret kindness. According to later chronicle accounts, an unnamed person slipped William a loaf of bread in which clean linen bandages were hidden. This covert gift allowed him to dress his wound properly. The care likely prevented infection, saving his leg and his life. Word of William's stand in the ambush soon reached Queen Eleanor. Safe and deeply grateful, Eleanor of Aquitaine did not forget the knight who had risked everything to defend her. Despite the ongoing rebellions plaguing the region, Eleanor made arrangements to secure William's release. She paid his ransom to the Lusignans, a considerable sum befitting a knight of such valor. In addition, once William was freed, the Queen saw to it that he was properly equipped to continue his service. She gifted him new horses, armor, and money, a generous reward for his loyalty and bravery. It was an extraordinary honor for a landless knight and a sign of Eleanor's high esteem. William Marshal emerged from the ambush of 1168 not defeated, but rather as a proven hero. He had nearly lost his life, but instead his name began to spread in courts and camps. Here was a knight of immense courage who held off a rebel ambush almost single-handedly and saved the Queen. In the aftermath, William remained attached to Queen Eleanor's household for some time, further proving himself in her service. The ambush in Aquitaine was a turning point. William's personal motto might well have become, "Never back down, even in the face of death." This ethos would carry him forward into the next chapter of his life, where he would face danger in a different kind of battlefield, the tournament arena. The tournaments. The late 1160s and 1170s marked the height of the age of tournaments, grand mock battles that were the training grounds and proving fields for knights. Fresh from the ambush ordeal, William Marshal was poised to make his mark in these chivalric games. In 1170, thanks to Queen Eleanor's patronage and his own growing renown, William gained a new assignment that would change his life. King Henry II appointed him to the household of Henry the Young King, the heir to the throne. Henry the Young King, so called because he was crowned as a junior king during his father's reign, was a teenager with a taste for glory. William Marshal's duty was to be the young prince's tutor in arms, essentially his mentor in knighthood and warfare. William joined the Angevin royal court as a knight in the service of the young king. The timing was pivotal. In 1173, not long after William entered his service, Henry the young king rebelled against his father in an infamous revolt. Caught between his loyalty to the crown and loyalty to his immediate lord, William chose honour. He stood by the young king throughout the rebellion. The revolt ultimately failed, and father and son made an uneasy peace in 1174. King Henry II forgave his son and his followers, including William, but tensions remained high in the royal family. Perhaps to keep his restless heir occupied, or to keep the troublemakers at a safe distance, Henry II allowed his son and his retinue of knights to travel across the English Channel and participate in tournaments throughout France. The king himself did not permit tournaments on English soil. He viewed them as chaotic and potentially dangerous, so the great contests were all held on the continent. Henry II may have figured that if these knights were eager to risk their necks, better they do so in tournament melees abroad than in rebellion at home. Thus, in 1176, Henry the young king and William Marshal embarked on the tournament circuit of northern France. These tournaments were nothing like the formal jousts depicted in later tales of chivalry. In the 12th century, a tournament was a massive mock battle, a melee where large teams of knights clashed over miles of open countryside. A tournament might begin with two groups of knights, sometimes numbering in the hundreds, charging at each other with lances couched. Once lances shattered in the initial charge, the knights would draw swords, maces or axes and fight on, either on horseback or afoot if unhorsed. The goal was not to kill, but to defeat and capture opponents for ransom. In effect, tournaments were a high-stakes war game, half sport, half serious combat. Knights who excelled could win fame and considerable fortune by capturing enemy knights, whose families would pay to free them, and by seizing valuable war horses and armour as prizes. William Marshal threw himself into this dangerous sport with relish. He had survived real war. Now he would master tournament warfare. From 1176 onward, William accompanied the young king to every major tournament they could find. Over the next several years, William Marshal fought in tournament after tournament across France, Flanders, and the Low Countries. In these contests, he quickly proved himself one of the most fearsome and skillful knights in Christendom. He possessed a keen strategic mind for battle tactics, astonishing endurance, and unmatched prowess with lance and sword. William's name soon struck both admiration and anxiety among other tournament goers. They knew the Marshal was a man to watch. Each tournament added to William's reputation. He became adept not only at single combat, but at the art of the melee, knowing when to charge, when to feint retreat, and how to coordinate with fellow knights to encircle an opponent. He also learned the practical business side of tournaments, selecting the best horses, managing the ransoms of captives, and dividing the spoils. Henry the young king was officially the leader of their team of knights, but it was William who became the driving force behind their victories. Time and again, William was at the forefront of the action, claiming the richest prizes. It was said that he began each tournament by carefully choosing a fine war horse from his stables, knowing full well he might ride it to exhaustion or injury in the fray. His confidence was such that he reputedly quipped, "Good horse, I'll either have you carried off this field honourably, or I'll replace you with a better one from the spoils of my enemies." One famous episode illustrates William's dominance on the tournament field. In 1179, a grand tournament was held at Lagny-sur-Marne to celebrate the coronation of the King of France's son. It drew the greatest knights from across Europe, seasoned champions eager to compete. William Marshal was among them, hungry to test himself against the best of the best. The melee that ensued was intense and long, with hundreds of knights struggling in combat across villages and fields. William was a whirlwind in battle. He reportedly unhorsed numerous knights that day and captured several for ransom. By the day's end, the field was strewn with broken lances and exhausted fighters. According to a later chronicle, the noble organizers agreed to award a special prize to the single knight who had shown the most prowess. When they asked the warriors and heralds present, one name kept coming up: William Marshal. Yet when heralds were sent to find him and bring him to receive the honor, the famed knight was nowhere to be seen. Eventually, they found William away from the crowds. He had slipped into a blacksmith's forge and was fast asleep with his head on the anvil, utterly spent from the day's exertions. Even in triumph, William's priority was to recover his strength for the next fight. Tournament life made William Marshal a rich man. Though he started with nothing, he won horse after horse, fine armor, and hefty ransoms from captured rivals. It was not uncommon for William to ride off at the end of a tournament with several captured horses in tow, the visible tokens of his victories. He fought in possibly over 100 tournaments during his career. Some sources claim that number, reflecting constant activity year after year. By his own later account, William bested, whether by unhorsing or capturing, over 500 knights in these competitions. Such a record was unheard of. He had become indisputably the greatest tournament champion of his age. Back in England, King Henry II may have been astonished at the reports. The king, who had once perhaps hoped that these dangerous contests would rid him of unruly knights, now saw one of them rising to unparalleled fame. William Marshal, the knight Henry had sent off with his son, was not only alive, he was forging a legend. Henry the young king, for his part, relished the reflected glory that William's success brought. The prince was an enthusiastic participant in the tournaments, but even he knew how much he owed to his tutor-at-arms. William's skill allowed the royal youth to boast of leading an invincible team. By the early 1180s, William Marshal's exploits were the talk of aristocratic Europe. Troubadours composed songs about the bold knight who won every challenge. He was admired by friends and grudgingly respected by rivals. However, such renown also bred jealousy. At court, envy stirred among less successful knights and courtiers. In 1182, rumours spread that William had grown too close to Henry the young king's wife, Princess Margaret of France. Some whispered that the landless knight aspired above his station, perhaps even to the affections of a princess. Whether these allegations were true or malicious slander, they tarnished William's standing with the young king. Bowing to pressure and wishing to quiet the scandal, Henry the young king reluctantly banished William Marshal from his entourage in late 1182. For the first time in years, William found himself adrift. But the separation would not last long. In early 1183, Henry the young king quarrelled again with his father and raised a new rebellion in Aquitaine. Facing war, the young king realised he needed his best knight at his side. William Marshal was recalled to the prince's service, and whatever grievances had come between them were set aside in the face of battle. Together, they rode into a campaign of rebellion, son against father, in a tragic sequel to the earlier revolt. Fate intervened cruelly before sword could meet sword. In the summer of 1183, as the conflict with King Henry II dragged on, Henry the young king fell gravely ill, likely of dysentery. William stayed by his liege lord's side, nursing the dying prince in his final days. On June 11th, 1183, the young King Henry passed away, ending the rebellion. Moments before his death, the 28-year-old prince made one last request of William Marshal. He asked his loyal knight to fulfill the vow he himself could not, to take the cross of a crusader and journey to the Holy Land on his behalf. William, with a heavy heart, promised to carry out his lord's wish. The era of tournaments and youthful adventures was closing for William Marshal. He had entered those contests as an unknown outsider and emerged as the most celebrated knight in Europe. Now, at roughly 40 years of age, he prepared for a new quest born of loyalty and honour, a pilgrimage and crusade to the Middle East, far from the tournament fields of France. Little did he know that even greater challenges and glories still lay ahead, and that his story as a knight was far from over. Rise to fame. Fulfilling his fallen lord's dying wish, William Marshal took the crucifix badge of a crusader and travelled to the Holy Land around 1184. The details of William's 2 years in the Middle East are sparse, lost to history. It is known that he reached Jerusalem and offered his sword in defence of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which was then under threat. He likely served with the Knights Templar or alongside other Crusader forces during a difficult period following the disaster at Hattin in 1187, though William arrived just before or around that time. By 1186, his vow complete, William Marshal made his way back to Western Europe. He returned not only as a famed tournament champion, but now as a knight who had seen the holiest and most war-torn lands of his world. When William came back to England in late 1185, he found an aging King Henry II in need of loyal, capable men. The king welcomed William Marshal at court. Despite William's former association with the rebel young king, Henry II had come to respect William's unwavering sense of duty. William was taken into royal service and quickly proved his worth as a seasoned commander. In the wars that flared in the late 1180s, particularly the conflicts with Henry's estranged sons, William stayed at the old king's side. He helped Henry II fight against the French incursions and against the rebellion of another royal son, Richard the Lionheart, in 1188 to 1189. During one notable skirmish in 1189, near Le Mans in France, William Marshal encountered Prince Richard, the future King Richard I, in battle. Richard was a famed warrior himself, but William was unmatched. Charging at full tilt, William unhorsed Richard with a lance, toppling the mighty Lionheart to the ground. In that instant, William had the power to kill one of the most celebrated princes in Europe. But he held back. Instead of delivering a fatal blow, William killed Richard's horse beneath him and chose to spare the prince's life. Some say William shouted, "I will not slay you today, my lord," making it clear that mercy, not fear, stayed his hand. This act of chivalry left a deep impression. Richard knew that William had essentially granted him his life in battle. In July 1189, King Henry II died, worn down by the betrayals and wars with his sons. At Henry's funeral, William Marshal was among the grieving loyalists, reportedly even helping carry the king's coffin. With Henry II gone, Richard the Lionheart ascended to the throne as King Richard I. Many wondered what fate would befall the knights who had fought against Richard in the recent conflict. William Marshal, however, was too valuable and too honourable to cast aside. Richard I welcomed William and even praised his loyalty. After all, William had only been obeying the late king, and he had shown magnanimity to Richard himself on the battlefield. Richard the Lionheart not only forgave William, he rewarded him richly. Remembering a promise Henry II had made, King Richard confirmed William Marshal's arranged marriage to Isabel de Clare, one of the greatest heiresses of the realm. In August 1189, at age 43, the landless knight married the 17-year-old Isabel, daughter of Richard Strongbow de Clare, the famous Earl of Pembroke, who had conquered much of Ireland. Isabel brought William enormous estates in England, Wales, and Ireland, including claim to the title of Earl of Pembroke. Almost overnight, William Marshal rose from a knight with a sterling reputation but no property to one of the richest men in the kingdom. It was a turning point that elevated him to the ranks of the high nobility. Despite the difference in age, William and Isabel's marriage blossomed into a strong partnership. They would have 10 children together and remain devoted. William treated his young wife with respect and trust, involving her in the management of their vast lands. In an age when many noblemen kept mistresses, William Marshal was said to have stayed faithful to Isabel. He had attained not just fame, but also family and fortune, the rewards of his decades of service and skill. William's rise to fame did not end with his marriage and new lands. If anything, it marked the beginning of his influence on the grand stage of history. Under King Richard I, William Marshal served as a key royal counsellor. When Richard departed on the Third Crusade in 1190, William was appointed to the Council of Regents left to govern England in the king's absence. He helped maintain stability during those turbulent years, even as Prince John, Richard's brother, plotted in the shadows. William's steadfast loyalty to King Richard never wavered, and when Richard returned from crusade and captivity, he confirmed William's standing and titles. By the 1190s, Sir William Marshal, now Earl of Pembroke, was renowned not only as a warrior, but as a statesman, respected for his integrity. William continued to prove his mettle in warfare as well. In his 50s, he still donned armour to fight alongside King Richard in Normandy, defending the Angevin lands against the French King Philip II. Seasoned knights half his age struggled to match William's energy and courage in battle. Richard the Lionheart trusted William Marshal with critical tasks, at one point naming him custodian of the strategic castle of Rouen and the royal treasury during the late 1190s conflict. Such honours showed that William's reputation as the Marshal, a title by which he was now known, referencing his hereditary role as Royal Marshal, was rock solid. After King Richard's death in 1199, William's steady hand was crucial in ensuring a smooth succession to the new king, John. William had become one of the kingdom's elder statesmen. He supported King John's claim and helped quell dissent. King John confirmed William's earldom and lands, recognizing in him one of the few men whose loyalty was unquestionable. Throughout John's tumultuous reign, William Marshal often acted as a mediator and voice of reason. Even when King John grew suspicious and envious, as he did with many of his barons, William's principled stand in favour of the crown kept him in the monarch's favour for most of the reign. The ultimate test of William Marshal's life came when King John's misrule led to rebellion and foreign invasion. By 1216, England was in chaos. Rebellious barons had invited Prince Louis of France to take the English throne, and King John died suddenly that October, leaving his kingdom to his 9-year-old son, Henry III. At that perilous moment, all eyes turned to the one man capable of saving the realm, William Marshal. Though nearly 70 years old, William was chosen unanimously as Regent of England and protector for the young King Henry. The veteran knight, who had been sent off to tournaments as a younger man, possibly to die in obscurity, now held the reins of the entire kingdom. William Marshal rose to this final challenge with all the vigour of his youth. In 1217, he led the king's forces into battle against the French invaders and rebel barons at the crucial Battle of Lincoln. William himself charged at the head of the army, a septuagenarian warrior in chainmail, sword raised high. His leadership turned the tide of the battle into a resounding victory. The French were driven out and the rebellion collapsed. It was a crowning achievement. William Marshal had saved the Angevin dynasty and the Kingdom of England from disaster. Many who saw the elderly knight lead that charge said it was like witnessing a figure from legend, a last and greatest exploit of the finest knight of the age. With peace restored, William ensured the boy King Henry III was securely crowned and the realm stabilized. Only then, with his duty fulfilled, did the old Marshal lay down his burdens. In 1219, sensing his end was near, William took holy vows as a Knight Templar, as he had once promised long ago in the Holy Land. He passed away at his estate on May 14, 1219, surrounded by family and loyal companions. True to his wishes, he was laid to rest in the Temple Church in London, where his tomb can still be seen today, marked by the effigy of a knight in repose. William Marshal's life reads like an epic of chivalry made real. He rose from a younger son with no inheritance to become the Regent of England and the unwavering guardian of a kingdom. Through every challenge, whether facing execution as a child, charging alone into an ambush to protect his queen, or wielding his lance in the ruthless free-for-all of a tournament, he displayed extraordinary bravery, loyalty, and skill. He defied death time and again, each time emerging stronger and more renowned. By the end of his days, he had served 5 English kings, from Henry II to Henry III, and earned the admiration of all. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton, eulogized William Marshal as the greatest knight that ever lived. Indeed, William Marshal became a living legend in his own time, and his legend has only grown in the centuries since. His true story is one of an underdog who refused to be defeated, a knight who was sent into peril again and again, only to return victorious. William Marshal's legacy embodies the very ideal of knighthood: honor, resilience, and the courage to do what is right, even at the risk of one's life. His remarkable journey from near certain death to immortal fame ensures that he will forever be remembered as one of the medieval world's most inspiring and extraordinary figures.